This is the third in this series called Today. We're told to live for today, yet our minds wander back to yesterday and they wander forward worrying about the future, but we're told to live today. So this one's called Love and Tell. In Deuteronomy, the word today is used over and over again, especially in the 11th chapter. It's a directive to God's children to love the Lord and keep his requirements and commands. And in verse 2, they're told to remember today that their children weren't the ones that saw the miracles, the crossing of the Red Sea, the drowning of the enemy armies. In other words, they experienced the guiding hand of God, but they were being told to remember today that their children had not seen those things. So the first call for today is to remember the hand of God that's been with us and to realize today that our children didn't see those things because they've come after us. In verse 7, he tells the people to observe the commands he's giving them today so that they'll have strength to now cross into the promised land, a land flowing with milk and honey, and so that they may live long, take possession of the land that God cares for. And it says, if they obey God's commands today, to love God and serve him with all their heart and soul, their land will receive rain in due season, they'll gather grain and grass for their cattle, and they'll eat and be satisfied. So first of all, remember that your children don't know what you experienced in the past. And secondly, listen to what God's saying today, to love him with all your heart and soul, and that comes with the promise of provision. A warning follows to not be enticed to turn away, but rather fix the words of God in their hearts and minds, tie them as symbols on their hands and bind them on their foreheads, and tell their children. It says as you talk at home or walk or lie down or get up, that's pretty much all day, write them on the door frames, on the gates, to ensure that your children's days will be many. This is our directive on how to live for today. Remember, our children don't know about our yesterday, God's hand of discipline and protection, but we can choose to love God with all our being and tell our children of these things. Are you worried about tomorrow? Recall the goodness of God from yesterday and tell it to your children today. And your only requirement for today is to love God with all your being. It's a daily directive, one that you can put on your to-do list, fill on your calendar, and lay back and sit and find comfort in this day that you've been given. Yesterday's woes are not to be concentrated on, but rather God's guiding hand. And tomorrow's worries are not to ruin today with fear, but rather we're to occupy ourselves to tell our children of yesterday's provision. That's our directive, love and tell. Finally, the people are reminded again to observe all God's commands, to love the Lord, walk in obedience, hold fast to him, and it's then that every place their foot walks on will be theirs, and no one can stand against them. The Lord will be with them, and in the final verses it says there's this blessing that if they obey what God gives them today, they will be blessed, and it will be accursed if they turn away. The people are about to cross into the land God's given them, this new land, and when they've taken it over there, he ends with saying, be sure you obey what I'm telling you today. I mean, this word is throughout the book of Deuteronomy. Think about how we spend our days. Perhaps it looks like this. We wake up, smell the coffee, and start our list. It consists of planning and buying and doing and things to be prepared for future activities. Maybe it's cleaning the house, preparing the yard, investing in stocks, all the things so tomorrow's full and set and ready. Our minds might wander to the past weeks and the disappointments and the failures. All sorts of thoughts and activities begin our day and continue till nighttime. But have we heard his voice today? This chapter seems to imply and direct that today is important. We have lived many years behind us, and our kids haven't seen what we have, nor experienced the goodness of God like we have. So that's part of what our today should be. Recall God's faithfulness. Make it a part of our homes and bodies and voices every day. It should be such a part of the framework of our home and the countenance on our face that when we're with our children and their children, we share his faithfulness. It doesn't have to be a sit down, listen to me affair where we're hammering them with God's word. This chapter tends to emphasize that today we listen and hear God's voice to call us to love him, and today we share the goodness of God from our past with our children, and today we make it part of our framework of our home when people enter and leave. This week, listen to his voice every day and obey it. Love him with your heart, soul, and mind. Talk to those younger than you. Listen to what they're saying. If they're talking about school and the test or tryout coming up, Share with them the goodness of God in your life when you hit a hard place. They won't know it if we don't tell them today. If your son or daughter calls and feels like they're a failure because of a job loss or their children have disappointed them, recall God's faithfulness to you as a parent. How will our children know of the goodness of God today if we don't tell them? And how can we tell them if we don't love the Lord with all of our being? And how can we lay down our fears if we don't do both of these things today? 7 times he says today in Deuteronomy 11. That's a lot. So instead of adding this to our to-do list, it should become part of the fabric of our living today. This week, wake up and listen to God's heart. Love him with all your being and respond. Keep your ears open to the children and their children, or others as you encounter them, and share with them